Do you ever wonder, how do people who have kids with picky appetites even cope? Because sometimes I barely have time to walk my dog, and he is getting whatever I put in that food bowl.
I do wonder, Sarah. I experienced my first mud bath, and now I know what it feels like to be a canned sardine. Don't tell me I never accomplished anything, Sarah.
I'm proud of you. After a few spare the air days here in LA, I am reminded, quite vividly, of smog.
Ugh. It's interesting that our pets just sit around looking cute and we love them for it. Real life seems unfair.
It sure does. Have such a good day. Hello, world. Welcome back to Have Such a Good Day.
Such a good day, the show that wants you to do just Episode 223.
223 in the place to be.
Yeah. Small talk, big talk, all the talks in between. Welcome to the show that unpacks the absurdity of everyday life for your entertainment and ours. Hopefully, we all get a good laugh.
We cry, so you don't have to
cry. Exactly. You know, I remember How To with John Wilson. You know that show. That guy is brilliant. I always loved his quote, and I remembered it. How, like, small talk is like the glue that binds us all together and the armor that shields us from each other's darkest thoughts. That's kind of like our show.
It's like when you're at a dinner party and you're like, what about the smog, huh? Yeah, the weather's been so strange. And everyone's just like, yeah, we're connecting. We're connecting.
Even though deep in the recesses of your mind, you're suffering and no one can really tell because you got your bells on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Love your shoes. Oh, yeah. They're real nice. Great color.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I can small talk all day. But yes, on the inside, sometimes I'm screaming.
Yes. But that's the thing. That's like kind of a special thing about being human. I mean, we can be good actors if we want to be, you know?
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. And also sometimes it's troubling. It is. Not that I'm not having a crisis of any kind as we're recording this show, but just because I do this kind of all day, every day. Sometimes when things are not going well, it's an escape because I'm like, on this show, we actually do sometimes talk about the hard stuff. Like, I'm going to tell you about the terrible day I had yesterday in just a few moments, everyone. But but sometimes you're just like, I need to channel my energy elsewhere, you know? And I'm not just going to like sit here like crying.
It's a good escape.
So, yeah.
No, and you know what? You're actually really good. I will say some people are better than others. Like, I would say you are way better than I am at like just switching it off and then turning on this like, just, I don't know, switching off that bad day and kind of showing more of this peppy side, even though you don't feel peppy. I think you're good at that. I remember in television, you would be having a bad day and up until the camera's rolling and you were completely just on. Like you would never know that you were having a bad day.
I think that there is, well, thank you for noticing that. There have been times, I don't know, like it's not even that I'm like having a bad day. Like maybe I have like a terrible headache or something. And I get through a show and I go, you know, I did pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah, totally.
But I also think that, and I'm not just talking about myself, I know some of you out there will probably relate to this, that kind of like, okay, I'm going to shelve the issues and do my thing. And then when my thing is over, the issues are still on the shelf.
Yeah.
You know, like they don't actually get resolved.
They don't go away. But it's a coping mechanism.
It's a coping mechanism.
And I think it's actually
also a little bit of
kind of a good skill.
It can be. It can also be an avoidance thing. Full disclosure, I think one of my my weakest traits are letting things bottle up. You know, I don't want to snap at people all day long. I certainly don't want to do that. But sometimes it's like, if there are too many things on that shelf, there's a snap.
Yeah.
There's a snap coming.
Totally.
Sounds like I'm talking about football. Here comes the snap.
And it's like hard to just have a conversation about it or bring it up because it's easier to avoid, basically.
Right. Well, Heather, I mentioned a particularly trying situation that I found myself in yesterday. So I'd like to share this with the group.
Yes, please do.
So on Okay, we're recording this at the end of the week, so let's just say, I don't know, it was midweek. I've got, I'm in my new apartment. There's one bathroom, which means one toilet. And I'm here by myself, so all good. It's never in use when I need it. And it's kind of old. The bathroom is it's really sort of the only room that hasn't been remodeled at some point over the years. And this is an old building, early 1900s. And it's fine. Whatever. I mean, I lived in San Francisco for 25 years. I know what old feels like. And although anybody in Paris right now would say, ha ha. So it's late at night, got, using the facilities, and the flush doesn't quite work. And I go, all right. I flush again, and now the water's starting to build up. Oh, so I'm like, okay, it's not just like an old toilet. Now we have an issue. Well, of course I don't have a plunger because I don't. I used to at my old house, and somehow it didn't get packed. How do you even pack a plunger anyway? You kind of just buy a new one. And it's kind of gross thing to pack. And so I'm,
it is a gross thing to
pack. You could wrap it in, I don't know, bubble wrap, and it would still be really gross to unpack that. So it's late. And I'm kind of like, it wasn't an emergency. It wasn't like it was overflowing onto the floor. But, we're in a situation that needs to be addressed first thing. So it's late. I go to sleep, because I'm just like, what? How could it possibly be worse, after a good night's sleep? It'll be only better for me than to have to go to some 24-hour CVS or something, which actually there are probably a few not that far away from me. But anyway, I was done for the night. Well, in the morning, I completely forget any of this happened. And sometimes in the morning, first thing, I just don't turn on lights. Like, I know where everything is, and sometimes you got to wake up and pee or whatever your body might want to do. We'll leave it at that.
Yep.
Well, I forgot. I flush, and I'm like, oh no, because at this point, the water is precariously close to spilling out onto the floor, which would mean that I have to burn the entire building down. And
or call a plumber, but
exactly. But then it's like, oh man, now somebody's in my toilet. And most of the time I have found, a good plunger will do the trick, but you need one. So here it is around 6:30 in the morning, and I'm just Googling hardware store near me. There actually is a hardware store on my block, on the end of the block. So could not be closer. But it doesn't open until 8. And I was like, I don't have that kind of time. So it's like, all right, what else is open? There's an Ace Hardware, there's this and that. And there's a Lowe's, that, home improvement store. For anybody who's not familiar, it's like a Home Depot, but more insane. Well, and that one it's not walkable, but it is a very short drive. It's in this big shopping center.
Is it more insane? I don't even know Lowe's that well. It's just bigger? Or
well, I'll tell you.
Why?
Okay. There's a Lowe's in this big shopping center where there's a Target and a PetSmart and an Ulta. And, I'm kind of over there fairly often. I'm like, that's not that far.
Yeah.
Let's get in the car and go. By the time I park, it'll be 7. That's when they open. I want this finished. I want this to be done. So drive over to Lowe's, not even awake yet. Haven't had coffee. Grumble, grumble, grumble. And yeah, they're open. But Lowe's, okay, so I don't really... So I have I don't want to call it a fear of super large stores, because a super large Target is my heaven. But there are certain super large stores, a Costco, for example, that are overwhelming to me in a bad way. And I'm just everything's stacked so high. What if I need something 30 feet up? I have to get a customer service agent up on a ladder. I don't even, my trunk isn't big enough for any of these things. So many boxes. But these stores exist for a reason. So I go into Lowe's, and, I'm the first one in the store. And it's you can tell it's me and guys that are going to be working on a construction site that day. They know what they're doing. They belong there. I do not. It is, I don't know if there are smaller Lowe's around, but this was so big. Lowe's-I. It was so big. There are 65 aisles. And so I'm okay, toilet plunger. All right. And they're signs all over the place, hardware, kitchen, this and that. I find the toilet section where they sell toilets, quite a few of them actually, quite a big variety at Lowe's. And I'm wandering around and I'm like, okay, all right, Sarah, look alive here. Plunger, you're here for a plunger. Let's not get distracted, because I'm like, ooh, this is a cool toilet, starting to like look at features of the toilet that are on the little thing next to it. So finally I'm just striking out. I find a person who works there. Do you guys have toilet plungers? Like, maybe they don't even have plungers. I don't know. Maybe it's like more like pieces of like, like ceramic toilets and sinks. He goes, oh yeah. No, you're in the right place. All right. So we're walking around and he's like, oh, it's weird. And, he's got like a smartphone where he can look up where things are. He goes, oh, no. You're right. They've moved the plungers away from the toilets. Why? I don't know. Yeah, those are over in like aisle 37. So I'm like, okay, so the plungers are nowhere near the toilets. Got it. That's fun. So I find the plungers. There's a good one. It's the same model I've used in the past. So I'm like, okay, I'm confident here. And, I get the plunger, but then I'm like, well, I'm already here. So, let's kind of walk around and see what we have to see. Oh my gosh. It was like being in a Bizarro world, Twilight Zone, whatever. Because then, as I'm walking through, I'm like, oh, wait a second. I still have to hang curtains in the bedroom, which I've just I don't know, just haven't done yet. Like nobody can really see in my bedroom, so it's not like a dire thing, but it would still be nice to have that. And, curtains. So I find curtain rods, but no curtains. So I asked somebody, do you guys carry curtains? And they're like, oh yeah, of course. No, you're in the right place. And it was the same thing again, where they're like, oh wait, no, they've moved stuff around. Hold on. I think you want to go to like aisle 18, which is like a mile away. Okay, I'll go over there. I eventually found some curtains. So at this point, I'm like, okay, let me get a shopping cart. I'm holding a plunger and I'm like, I'm going to get some more stuff. I start putting things in the shopping cart. And then I'm like, wait, I need a tape measure, because somehow my 3 tape measures did not make my move. How? Don't know. It's just one of those things. And at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to ask anybody. I'm going to find a tape measure, which is for sure in this Lowe's somewhere. I'm in the hardware area. There's drill bits. There's hammers. There's everything except
you could ever imagine.
A tape measure. Everything. And I was just at this point, I was half delirious and half mad, just like, what am I doing? I unload my entire shopping cart. I decide not to get any of the curtains or curtain rods, because I'm like, I'm not thinking clearly right now. I can't even find a tape measure. I buy my plunger. I leave. On the way home, I stop at this like just mini mart that's like on the way back. And I walk in and I'm like, do you guys have a tape measure? Fully expecting them to be like, no, we just have like beer and wine and like weird t-shirts. And they're like, yeah, we have a tape measure. They had one tape measure, perfectly fine tape measure. I overpaid for it, as one does when they're, desperate. And that's the end of my story yesterday, Heather. It was just one of those things. Oh, and by the way, I'm totally burying the lead here. Plunger worked. Toilet is fine. So we're back in business.
So you did not have to burn the house down, and you did not have to call a plumber.
No. And
I was just going to say, you didn't have to call a plunger.
A plumber probably would have done exactly what I did, which took, 0.5 seconds. And yes, water now flowing. And I have a plunger that, it's a weird looking accordion type plunger. I don't know if any of y'all have used these, but they work great, but they look really weird out of context. You're sort of like, is that an instrument?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Or something? So I've got it like on my back stoop, which one of my neighbors shares the stairs of the back stoop. So I can only imagine they're either like, oh, she got a plunger, or what is that? I don't know.
Yeah, those are kind of odd. And it's sort of an unfortunate, that's not an appliance. And it's an unfortunate object that has to be in your bathroom, because it's just not pretty.
Yeah.
And it symbolizes overflowing
in a
toilets,
perfect world, you need to use a plunger, never. But yes, it's exactly the sort of thing you really need to have on hand, or you end up at Lowe's like me at 7 a.m. going like, what am I buying? The store's so big.
Also, plungers. Plumbers are not cheap.
No.
Let me tell you. Let me tell you about how certain specialists, when you manage buildings, are not cheap. Electricians are another. You really want to avoid calling some of these people unless you really have to. So bravo, Sarah, for solving your own problem.
Thank you.
That always feels good. It's sometimes that's like the one thing that can really perk you up. You solve something so kind of mundane, but you kind of feel good about yourself. You're like, I am a capable human.
Yeah.
You know? So bravo.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, it's not the first clogged toilet I've ever encountered in my life. But I mean, when you mentioned, all the people who specialize in this stuff, when I was managing the property up in Northern California, there were quite a few plumbing issues over the course of the several years that I lived there. One was, most of them were actually not in my unit, but once it was in my unit. And there was like, this was beyond a plunger situation where like a plumber had to like take apart part of like the retaining wall, which is made of concrete. There's jackhammering, he's trying to find the pipe, he's digging in the mud. It was raining. I mean, it was like a multi-day job, which ended up being a success. But the whole culprit, which nobody would have known unless he had done all the stuff, was a root from a tree stump, I don't know, it finally grew into the pipe and just like shut off the pipe. And somehow, until one day, the pipe just like kept chugging, even though it wasn't like a cylindrical pipe anymore, and then said, oh, nope.
No, that's a thing of like property ownership is like tree branches. We had to recently pull out a whole tree because it was buckling the cement. I mean, it's kind of a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I never really, this has been such a crazy education because I never owned a home before this, and this lasts like 4 years, I guess. And the myriad of problems that you can have, it's just endless, and it doesn't really stop ever. You fix one problem and then something else pops up. I mean, it's really a headache. And in a way, I almost miss renting because then you don't have to be the one responsible for calling that specialist to fix something.
Yeah.
And it's just,
I mean,
it's just endless.
If the plumbing situation would have been something beyond, my capability, then I mean, the landlord would have to get involved, and, I mean, I either have to get paid back later, or, whatever it is. All is well, but it was
Good.
one of those things where
it was traumatic.
It was one of those things where I was either driving to Lowe's or driving back, whatever it was, where I was like, I had sort of like a manic episode inside of Lowe's just now, where I truly thought I was going to buy like a large shopping cart full of things, curtains and rods, and there's actually rod hardware on my walls right now, but not the rod itself. So I'm like, well, I don't need the hardware, but you can't buy the rod without the hardware. Don't they just make rods on their own? Oh my God. I was just like,
like total spiral.
Yeah, and I thought, you know what? Have Such a Good Day is going to hear all about this. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming along on my journey.
We have the perfect platform for Downward Spirals.
Exactly.
It's the perfect show. We should just rename it Downward Spiral. You're not alone, Sarah, because I actually did a walkout the other day. It wasn't as dramatic. I didn't have a spiral, but sometimes I'll go into a CVS that is just really disorganized and like the shelves are empty and I can't find what I'm looking for. They're out of Benadryl. They're out of, just some basic stuff. And then there's like a long line with no automatic checkouts. So I'll just put my stuff on a random shelf and I'll walk out. I'm like, I don't need it that bad right now. I'll just do it later. Cause I can't be bothered sometimes, especially, if I'm on my way somewhere, I'm running slightly late, can't wait in line of, 5 people deep. I don't know why some of these places don't have there's these good CVSs that have like 3 or 4 automatic checkouts, which I'm really good at now. At first, when I first started using them, they there were some issues and I had to call somebody over, and I wasn't like super savvy.
Right.
And now I'm just like, I don't really want to talk to another human.
Yeah, I mean, as long as there's a station, it can be easy. You know, funny that you mentioned that, because I'm the same way. I mean, I will use self-checkout every time, like, unless you're like buying a bottle of wine or something at a grocery store, you know, where you have to see a human, which is all good. But I was in, where was I? I was in a Ralph's, a large grocery chain, particularly in LA. They're everywhere. And it was just talk about a large store. I mean, kind of the biggest Ralph's I've ever been in. And we're, you know, self-checkout, and I've got a fair amount of groceries. So, you know, I have to, you know, I had bags, and, you know, it's kind of a whole thing where you put everything. Mm-hmm. And there were like several security guards like watching all of us like a hawk, which I assume is because people just don't scan items, and so they don't have to pay for them. You know, you kind of have to have someone observing everything that you're doing. And I think you're just going to get certain stores where there is more of that happening. So they have to employ people to just sort of watch you do this thing so that you don't have to like talk to the people, but often you do. And I don't know, like that. I don't really care. It's like, you can watch me pack my own groceries and pay with my credit card if you really want to. But it's also like, it kind of gives me the sense of like, I'm looking over my shoulder like, oh, I have to hurry. So, yeah.
Well, sometimes too, like, and I, you know, I just want to forewarn you, one of my cats is right under my microphone, and he's like rubbing his face on, like, this is kind of sketchy here. Okay. All right. Well, we'll see how this goes. But yeah, sometimes too, like, I do think sometimes there are those checkers. There's nothing wrong with it per se, but sometimes it's a lot of small talk that you just don't really want to partake in, and you don't want to be rude, because, you know, I like talking to a stranger, but sometimes it's like it's a little much depending on, you know, where you're headed and how much time you have. So it's sort of nice to use a robot. Anyway, I wanted to I'll fill you in on my week. I just got back actually yesterday late afternoon. I just went down to a place called Calistoga, and we've been trying to do this every January, me and my sister, for various reasons. January is, like I've said before, is a bit of the pits for me. There's a lot of landmine days. You know, it's my dad's birthday. It's my sister's birthday. It's some other dates that are just
they weigh heavily
unsavory.
on you.
Yeah, it's a heavy month. And so we have been trying to do this kind of annual it's kind of a business retreat, but it's also kind of represents, it's like a family vacation in a way too. So we do talk a lot of business. It's something, it's a place for us to get out of our normal everyday routines, work lives, routines, and to talk about bigger picture stuff, you know, to try to just get out of our heads and think about the future, think about the new year. And so, you know, I like to call it my quote unquote business retreat. But I always look forward to it. It's sort of like a nice mix of business and pleasure. And the place that we stay, we always stay at the same place, has an Olympic sized hot tub. It's pretty famous. It's like a volcanic, you know, healing waters. Apparently it's like full of like, you know, the water is very special, supposedly. Mm-hmm. And it is a really special pool. It's like people come from far and wide to dip into it. And I do consider myself kind of a hedonist. So like, I love a good spa treatment. I love to like pamper myself. I love saunas and cucumbers on the eyes and a good face mask. And I've tried most treatments out there, but I've never, ever been interested in a mud bath. And in this part of the world, it's like wine country, kind of where you moved from, Sarah. Mm-hmm. Mud baths are pretty popular because it's oftentimes where there's volcanic ash and volcanic sort of geyser.
Yeah, it's like mineral rich soil.
Exactly. And this place is known for it. So they offered us a free, like a complimentary mud bath because we booked in January. I don't know what it was. It was like booking during the week or something. So I was like, all right, I mean, I might as well try it. I've heard really mixed reviews. A lot of people I've talked to about it said they felt claustrophobic, wasn't their favorite thing. You feel kind of trapped under this mud, and it's recycled mud and blah, blah, blah. So I just, it's not really my thing. And it kind of makes me think of Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1978. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Y'all out there?
I don't even think I've ever seen it, but I know how much I know how much this movie means to you.
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. But Sarah, I figured you wouldn't get the reference, but some of you out there probably will. There's a little creep factor. But my point is never say never, because I just discovered how wonderful mud baths are. Better late than never. They're pretty great and very kind of moved the needle for me. Like, it was the most relaxing I've ever felt, I think, in my life, because what it does is you get in the tub and you kind of lay on top of this mud. It's very firm, so you don't really sink. It's hot. I mean, it's hot, bearable hot, but like comfortable hot. And then someone buries you. And it's kind of this trippy like ritual. You know, they pile on this heavy, it's very heavy, you know, so you're really weighted down, and they cover you up until your neck, and you have a little pillow, you know, your hair's not in there. It's a bizarre experience. And you lay there for about 15 minutes and you sweat, like your face, like it's very detoxing. And it's a little claustrophobic. Like I think I'm kind of somebody who can get claustrophobic, like in an airplane, in the back of an airplane, that kind of thing. But I felt like it was kind of a weird, comforting heaviness. And like you couldn't move, but it kind of felt comforting. Anyway, I yesterday was the day that we did this, and it was the day before. But I have a hard time feeling relaxed like that for a long period of time. And I felt so relaxed all day, like to the point where like zero anxiety, just like
that's
I
nice.
felt so good. And I wish I could like bottle that feeling. You know, it's kind of like when you go on vacation, you come back and you feel good for like a day. You feel like you're floating on, you know,
right.
on
Yeah.
air.
Before real life creeps back in.
Yeah. And I felt like, you know, that I had it all day, but then it kind of went poof the next day. I want to know from y'all out there, what do you do to relax, and how do you hold on to that feeling? Email us at hi@havesuchagoodday.com and let me know if you've ever had a mud bath. Or if maybe you've had a bad mud bath experience. I would love to hear about that.
Well,
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Let's bring on the stories, y'all. I will tell you real quick, Heather. I have had exactly one mud bath, just like what you're describing, in Calistoga. This is many years ago. A friend of mine and I, you know, she and I were just like, let's go to wine country. We lived in the city at the time. And, you know, so that's an easy getaway. And, you know, we'll just like, I don't know, eat dinner and get spa treatments. And one of those was, you know, where we stayed was not a fancy hotel. And it's also not the place that you stayed, but there are quite a few of those experiences in this town, Calistoga, especially because of, the geysers and the minerals in the water, etc. And it was the room that we were in. I remember just thinking like, oh, it's going to be like a spa. And it felt more like where like cattle would be washed off, you know?
Yeah, totally.
With kind of these big kind of.
It's not very glamorous.
No, and it's also a little stinky. I mean, it's not manure, but it's like,
no,
you're like, oh,
but it's mud.
This is like straight up, you know, mud with stuff in it. And there's shovels, and we sort of were. It was the same thing where I'm like, am I claustrophobic? I'm actually pretty comfortable, but like this also feels gross. But like but I'm comfortable. But like, okay, I can't like stand up really quickly if I want to. Like kind of like a quicksand feeling. And
totally quicksand.
And then,
I mean, not that I've ever been in quicksand.
And she and I were next to each other. I don't think anyone else was in the room. Maybe we had it to ourselves. You know, it's somewhat hazy to me. But, you know, after you're done, you know, you get helped out and you're still kind of covered. You have to do like a very thorough shower. All sorts of crevices must be addressed.
Oh, yeah. Your belly button. Don't forget your belly button.
Belly button would be one of those. And, you know, and she and I are like naked, like washing ourselves off and just sort of like,
Totally.
you know, which is fine. She's a good friend, but like, you know, we're like, we didn't really think of it this way.
It's definitely not. It's like the least glamorous like spa treatment. I feel like.
It's you really have to just be like health benefit. That's what I'm doing. This is
Yeah.
fun. It was something I've never done again. I would try it again, but at the time I was like, okay, that was not totally what I was expecting.
Well, you know, it's funny. It's not. My sister is very modest, and I'm not as modest. And she had a hard time because you're very exposed, and then the person is like rubbing mud on you on all of your parts, and so you feel a little like if you are modest and you don't like to be naked around other people, it's not for you. It's almost like a human car wash, like when you go to those Korean spas and you get that full body scrub, and it's not like it's like a car. It's like you're literally in, you know, it's just it's not like a fancy space. It's just covered in mud and water, and you know, it's an interesting experience.
I've yet to go to a Korean spa like that, although there are quite a few in my new neighborhood. I probably had something similar in Turkey once. You know, the Turkish bath ritual, which is very common. Same thing, where it's like full body exfoliation, but like it's almost painful. Where I'm like,
it is a little
like
bit.
it's like it. I know what it's for. I know it's good circulation. You know,
your skin is so soft.
You're sloughing. Is that the word? Sloughing off the you know skin cells.
Sloughing.
But I remember there was like, it was like you have, you know, the kind of women are in one area and the men are in another, and at one point it was like we were then in a single area where it's like, after a certain amount of things have to happen in a certain order, you're supposed to do like a cold plunge. And I was like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
You know what? And like the person I was with at the time was like, you can do it, sir. And I'm like, no, I don't want to.
I don't want to.
I just don't. I don't want to be cold right now. I'm warm and I think I'm done. I just don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to do the plunge. I don't remember if I was
totally.
guilted into it or not, but I was just like, okay, I've had enough. I've had enough of this kind of like sideways experiment.
Yeah, and also like just like the spa thing, like after a few days of like being in the pool, out of the pool, wet, like I brought 3 bathing suits, you start to kind of be like, I'm a little waterlogged, like I'm kind of done. Like my skin smells like chlorine.
Right.
You know, I can only handle so much luxury or pampering.
Well, Heather,
I
I'm
guess.
glad you took one for the team. And
I
did a spa week so that we can all just kind of, you know, feel good about our lives,
live vicariously.
Yeah. Well, speaking of living vicariously, I am hoping this is kind of like, I mean, I don't know if it's really an announcement because you would have known about it before now if you follow some of my other stuff, but the Apple Vision Pro mixed reality headset. Augmented reality, VR. I mean, it's Apple calls it spatial reality, but you know, let's call it VR AR, just to keep things simple. The pre-orders launched this morning of this recording, super early, 5 a.m. And I will be getting one to test for Daily Tech News Show, and I have decided to dip the toe back into the Apple focused podcast game, which I used to do quite a bit of, and do an Apple show with co-host Eileen Rivera, who you know, Heather, who also happens to be Tom Merritt's wife.
So you're doing a new podcast?
Yeah. Now it's not just about
amazing.
the Vision Pro headset. Although that's obviously kind of what got us thinking about this. Like, you know, we don't want to. The whole thing with, you know, a daily tech news show, which is what DTNS is that if you go too hard onto one topic too often, people go, well, this seems like hyper focused. And DTNS is supposed to be, as you know, we try really hard every day to be well-rounded technology news. You know, not everybody lives in the U.S., for example. There's lots of stuff going on, you know, all around the world. You know, is it about, you know, going to space? Is it about, silicon chips? Is it about hardware? Is it about lifestyle? It's like, yeah.
Yeah, you can get in the weeds.
So
yeah.
with certain exceptions, we never don't, we just don't simply, we don't have time to talk about one thing too much, or we'll hear about it from people like, there's a bias or whatever. So something that is focused on Apple is not something that I'm currently doing, but I used to do a lot of it when I worked at This Week in Tech, Twit. And yeah.
So is this via Apple, or you guys are just gonna is this just something that you guys came up with?
Oh yeah, I mean, Apple didn't ask us to do the show. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. That would probably be a pretty comfy budget. No, this is just it's what we're doing right now. But Fun. We're going to talk about Apple, the Vision Pro, obviously, because it's a very buzzy new piece of hardware software. But just all sorts of stuff. And I love it. I'm stoked about it. I love a new project.
Is it going to be a weekly?
It'll be a weekly. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I don't know. I feel like I'm just babbling on. I love a new project. Sometimes for the reasons we were talking about earlier in the show, where it's like, it's good to just like put your head down and do something and make something and feel good about it. And, I don't have a ton of spare time in my life right now. So more work means less spare time, but it also gives me an opportunity to be like, okay, how do I manage this time better? Time management is something I struggle with all the time. Sometimes, there'll be days, days on end where I'm like, I haven't really relaxed because there's just something to do and then I have to sleep. And then there are other days where I'm just like, F it. I'm going to sit in my underwear and I'm going to watch a movie. And I'm not going to answer my texts. And that's just what's happening. So more work means less of that. But also means that, when I do have time to do that, then hopefully I will relish it all that much more.
Yeah. No, I love this for you. Sometimes, it's funny. This actually segues really nicely into this last thing I wanted to talk about in today's show. But my boyfriend, him and I were having this conversation last week. He was like, sometimes you just have to create little things as you go, because they're like, instead of being so lofty with your expectations with yourself and with your creative goals, like instead of, I'm so mad at myself, I have not written that screenplay yet. It's like, just write a little bit every day. Write a sentence every day. Yeah. Just some little small thing that makes you feel like you're slowly pushing that rock up the mountain, up the hill. And he's really good at that, because he's like, every single day, he's a photographer. He has like 8 different weird cameras, and so he's always experimenting with light and with going places and trying to find a new thing to shoot. And he, every single day, he has some kind of output, some kind of creative output, however small it is. And it makes him feel like more like accomplished, like he's actually doing something, heading in some direction. I need to be better about that, because I think for me, I like having this podcast because it forces me into some kind of schedule every week, even if it moves a day here and there. I know that I have to get something finished by the end of the week. And I kind of like that. I like the bolstering of the week. Otherwise, I have to like do everything myself. I have to like really push myself. Manage my own time. Sometimes it's hard without a deadline where everything is nebulous. But alas, I would rather be at Sundance Film Festival. I'm a little bummed I didn't get a ticket to go. The movie I worked on a year ago is premiering there, and I'm not there. Just kind of like trying not to get too bummed about that. But I'll see the movie at some point. I'm just here watching Warner Brothers unpack and settle into their new office down the road, which I've mentioned. P.T. Anderson, Paul Thomas Anderson, of one of my favorite movies, Boogie Nights, is shooting a film here right now. Kind of a big deal, I think, because he's one of my favorite filmmakers. I haven't stumbled upon any of the actual shoots yet. I'm hoping I will. But like I said a few minutes ago, instead of putting all this pressure on myself to write that damn screenplay or do something bigger, whether it's, like it doesn't have to be a screenplay, but just some kind of bigger project, not letting yourself, it's kind of this like low stakes expectations of yourself is, I think, something that I need to be better at, because I think I create high stakes expectations, which isn't really fair, especially when we're in a bit of a dead zone of the year where it's like there isn't, like January is a little bit of a dead zone for like work and just things and people like matriculating. And so it's kind of a tough time. It's like you're basically shooting yourself in the foot, like setting up all these goals, these lofty goals of doing this and doing that. But if I wrote just a little bit every day.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, anybody who, I don't know, is a novelist or just writes for a living. I mean, I would call myself someone who writes for a living, but it's like news blurbs more than long form stuff. I don't know, a little of everything, but these days much more kind of like newsy stuff rather than something where I can like really unpack feelings. But I feel the same way as you. It's like, it feels so daunting, but it's like every author had to start with one page.
Exactly.
And like that one page doesn't have to be that great. It can just be like,
no, it's
just
true.
Sort of like, I don't know, brain babble. And then you go back and clean it up whenever you want to.
Edit it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a good editor, but I'm not as good with a blank page. I think that's the problem I have. Here's the interesting thing, this is part of the reason why I bought that little like handy portable mic, because I'm much more of a thinker, talker, like articulator person than I am a sit down at the computer and write and type out my thoughts. And I like when I was laying in the mud, for example, where your mind just clears out of all the like buzz and just like the little things, like you start to actually like, I start to sort of feel creative, and I'm writing my screenplay in my head, literally. Like I have this idea. And if I could just take that stream of consciousness out of my head and onto a paper, I'd be getting somewhere. But I like who I am. I'm less of a writer than somebody who could sit down and talk about my thoughts to somebody, have a conversation and get somewhere with it. And so I've really toyed with doing more audio recordings of just like my thoughts, but then I'm fucking lazy and I don't do it. And then I get mad at myself. And it's this whole cycle of I'm going to do this and then I don't do it. And then I get mad at myself. And so I'm going to try again this year.
I think, well, good. I think you should. And, it's like, there's no sense in beating yourself up for what you haven't done, because you could do it as soon as we stop this recording.
I'm so good at it, though. I know.
I know. So I have, I was about to say, like, I have, a perfectionist thing. Everybody does.
Same.
I don't think I am like a perfectionist to the point that some people are.
It's detrimental.
Well, I mean, maybe it is a little bit,
totally.
but I think I do fear failure, though, very much so. And people the smartest people in the world who are wildly successful will say like, oh, you just have to embrace that stuff because that's how you learn, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And I know that's all true. And at the same time, there are many things I don't start because I'm like, it'll just suck. So why bother?
I know.
And
so
it's like, it's such a like, and it's like, I feel like I have plenty of confidence about some things and I really don't about other things, even though maybe if I just give it a shot, it could be, even if I'm like, okay, maybe I won't write like a novel that anybody reads, but what if I do that? Yeah. Maybe I'd feel pretty great about myself.
Well, exactly. Oh yeah, it would be amazing. I mean, that would be like the ultimate if I could actually get the screenplay out like on paper, even if I can't do anything with it. Because that's the other challenge is how do I even get to doing this? But I've listened to a lot of interviews of successful people, successful companies and that kind of thing. They all say the same thing that we're talking about right now. Is like getting yourself to just move the needle just like an inch at a time. And they have that fear of failure too. So I think it's the human condition, and so I will report back. We will keep talking about this. I think this is a This is sort of a little
Might
bit
be
of
the kick in the butt you
to our
need,
show.
Heather.
Exactly.
Get that page written. Stat.
Yeah. All right. I'll work on it, Sarah.
Well,
I'll try at least.
While Heather works on that, I know we'll all be we'll be rallying in your corner, and we hope that all of you out there are having a good January wherever you are, and whatever kind of heavy life things might be thrown your way. We hope that we have been a good hour of your time, an escape maybe, something to relate to, hopefully. And we'll be back doing it again next week because that's what we do here.
That is what we do, Sarah. And if you want to become a patron, we would love you forever. We really would, right, Sarah?
Yes, indeed. The patrons that we already have, you know who you are. Thank you so much. I could not do the show without you. We are a humble little show of two, but we want to keep cranking, and we hope to have more patrons going forward. If you're listening to the free version of the show, not mandatory, but if you'd like to directly support us, go to patreon.com/havesuchagoodday to find out more about how to do that. Thank you in advance, and that's our show. 223 shows Heather and I have done.
Ah, yeah.
Which is like, I mean, I know we've been doing this for a while, but it still sounds like such a big number.
It is, and you know, we should be proud because this is when you start doing something, you sort of take it for granted and you forget, oh, wait a minute, we've done 223 episodes. I mean, it's not like Mark Maron who's done like 2,000. Like, you know, I mean, there's other people who've done more, but there's other people who've done less.
Well, I mean, I do daily shows where it's like the numbers are in the thousands and it looks like so crazy, but it's like, yeah, but that's 5 days a week. I mean, it's going to rack up. That's just basic math. All right, everybody. Without further ado, we're going to say peace out. We'll see you next week and have such a good day.
Bye-bye.